Welcome back to part 3 of the MAME pre-configuration project, and if you're new to this project, I suggest starting with the first video in this series as it goes into a bit more detail about what is being done, and I'll pop a link for that in the description below. But just to quickly summarise, I'm toothpicking my way through MAME platform by platform and setting all of these controls properly, and I'm providing button layout images for every single game. And this is being done for twin stick analog controllers exclusively. Also, I'm going through and making sure that these games are set up into their ideal state. By default, a lot of these games aren't even set up to play with their maximum amount of players or have any of their unlocks unlocked. So I'm going through and making sure that is done as well. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at Sega System 16. The first thing I want to talk about is one game, one ROM with parents taking priority. Sometimes that is not the best way forward, and the parent version of that game is not necessarily the version that you want to be playing, and this can be for multiple reasons. And the Sega System 16 arcade platform is a perfect example of this, with multiple games needing multiple versions for various reasons, and I'm going to show you what these are now. First off, the System 16 arcade board had two versions, the initially released A board and then the later released B board, which featured better clocks and better audio. And all games that were released on the A board had later releases on the B board. However, these games here have their parent versions based on the A board, not the B board. So for these games, I've made sure to configure for the parent A board version and the clone B board version, and that's what I'm going to be doing moving forward. I'll always configure the parent version, and that's for the lazy merge set users, but I'll always configure what would be considered to be the definitive clone version, and that's for people that really want to refine their builds. I'll always work towards one game, one ROM, but in situations like this, it's not necessarily the best way forward. And I'm trying to configure for two types of users. Those that just want to grab a MAME set, import it, slam these files in and just go. And also I'm configuring for those who are connoisseurs like myself, who want to use versions that aren't necessarily the parent ROMs, or for users that want to use multiple versions of the same game for whatever reason. Another example of when you might want to use two ROMs for the same game is Action Fighter. This game had two input types. One version was a standard digital input type with joystick and buttons, and the other one was an analog input variant with a steering wheel and pedals. For me personally, I prefer the digital input version, but you might be like, no way, analog's the way forward. So of course I've configured for both. And I'll actually integrate both of these into my Launchbox build, but still consider it to be one game, one ROM. Also, for some games like Quartet here, there are a 4 and 2 player variants. The 2 player variant lets you select your character, but the 4 player variant, its character is set to the joystick position on the actual cabinet. So if I wanted to play as the third character, I would need to press start on the third controller. So we want both in this situation. I want to be able to play 2 player and select my character, but still have the option to play this in 4 player. So I'll have both of those. Now in my documentation, if multiple ROMs are being used for the same game, it will be listed, along with the reason why. So make sure that you check out this page to make sure that you're using the correct versions. And as I stated earlier on, the parents will be configured as standard, then any applicable clones on top of that. When it came to setting controls, most of the games on this board were easy enough, just joysticks and buttons. But the baseball games on this board, oh my god, these have been the most difficult and awkward to set up so far. You've got 2 trackballs, 2 player positionings that share inputs, absolutely no inputs labelled in the input test, and inputs that seemingly don't exist but are really just default positionings. But ultimately, nothing that I can't handle. And the last thing to note about controls is that I've set SDI to play as a twin stick shooter, as it should be. With unlocks and enhancements, there's only a couple of things to mention. Bullet has a 3-player mode that you can unlock in its dip switch menu, and why wouldn't you want to play 3 players? And Shinobi has an English mode that is also available in the dip switches, and that's of course all been done for you. And those files are available over on the Launchbox forums and on GitHub, and I'll pop links for those in the description below. There we go, that just about does it for the Sega System 16. Overall, this has been one of the most difficult boards to configure for so far, and I'm pretty sure there's more difficult on the horizon. So if you want to keep up to date with my journey through MAME, you know what to do, and if you liked today's video, slam me a thumbs up, and apart from that, go play some games. Adios.